The Baltimore Ravens signed former Chicago Bears safety Eddie Jackson. We talk about what it means for the team, an updated look at Baltimore's secondary, what Jackson brings to the table, and so much more coming up next here on this special live edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this Friday afternoon. This is our first live show, I think, since the schedule release here on Locked On Ravens. So really appreciate you making some time on this Friday afternoon and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day here on your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. So if you're here live with us on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also hit that notification button as well so you can follow along with our 5 days per week, plus more like these episodes of Ravens content. If you're in audio form as well, these live shows do come out after the fact in audio form if you prefer to listen or you miss one. So be sure to subscribe and follow along over there as well. Today's bonus episode, live edition of Locked On Ravens, is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Job Touch to find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Man, this is absolute scramble mode for me right now. I know there were rumblings about Eddie Jackson and the possibility of him coming to Baltimore, filling that third safety spot, and we got it. We got it right about the time of this recording. An hour, not even an hour ago, maybe 45 minutes ago here. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about Eddie Jackson, who he is as a player, what he brings to the table, his specific skill set, and we'll also dive into an updated look at Baltimore's secondary as a whole. And we already have people in the live chat. David, always appreciate you hopping in here. We actually have a Bears fan who says he's sorry in advance here. And I do know there are some downsides to Eddie Jackson's game. He's no longer the player he once was, but we will talk about that and why it might not be as big of a deal in a reduced role. And Joe, shout out to you. I figured once the signing happened, you would have had something to say about it. I think Kevin might go live. So here we go. Raven76B more as always, checking in. I appreciate your 4,900. There we go. And then I appreciate you, Joe. I really try here. We go live after every single piece of Ravens big news. We'll go live after every single Ravens game this season. And a new thing is we'll have bonus episodes on game day, not live, but just pre-recorded bonus episodes of the show. So Eddie Jackson. It was reported by Adam Schefter, a 1-year deal. And this is a move to me where if you've been listening to me, if you're an everydayer on Locked On Ravens, you know how much I was banging the table. I was saying this team needs a veteran safety. They need somebody in that third safety role to replace Geno Stone. They hadn't had that. They hadn't had a third safety to replace Stone. They drafted Sanusi Kane in the 7th round. They ended up signing Bo Braid as an undrafted free agent. They've obviously been talking up Darius Washington a bunch as well. But there was just something about the stability. And look, Geno Stone was a young player, and I still think the Ravens believe in Darius Washington. This to me doesn't have anything to do with Washington in general. This to me is just bringing in veteran stability in the room, and that's what they needed. So Eddie Jackson as a player, I'm pulling up his stats again. This has been pure pandemonium for me here. But Jackson is 30 years old. He turned 30 back in December. Obviously was drafted back in 2017, the 2017 draft from Alabama, and played on the same defense as Marlon Humphrey in college. Obviously played with Roquan Smith in Chicago. So there are multiple Ravens connections with Eddie Jackson. Now, over the course of his career, Jackson has been known as that ball hawking type player. His best year came in his second season in the league, 2018. He had 6 interceptions that year, all Pro Bowl, the accolades. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. And over the course of his career, he's played for 7 years, has 15 interceptions. So just over 2 interceptions per year. So not terrible. I mean, he's a guy that in that role in Chicago, he's someone that you're not going to rely on to tackle, right? I think one of the weaknesses in his game is he's not a strong tackler. And while he certainly had some element of that early in his career, he doesn't have that element as much anymore. He's actually very durable as well. Hasn't had a catastrophic major injury that's cost him like a whole year. He's played in 100 games in 7 years, so you average that out, and that's actually pretty good. He's the most games that he's played in a season, obviously a full one. The least amount of games he's played in a year is 12. So if he has to miss a couple games per year, that's fine. But this is the thing. You're not relying on Eddie Jackson as a starter. You're not relying on him to come in there and play all these snaps. Now, here's the thing. When we talked about safety on this show and what the specific skill set that Baltimore needed there was a split high, single high guy that you could throw in that Geno Stone role. We talked about how they had Jamal Adams in for a visit. That did not fit the skill set they needed. That's not Jamal Adams. That's not his game. The reason why the Ravens were so effective last season is because they had Geno Stone, who replaced Marcus Williams. That's the big thing. Williams barely missed any time in 5 years with the Saints, right? Barely missed any time. Comes to Baltimore. He's had 2 very serious injuries in 2 years. So to me, if you want to bank on his health, that's fine. But if he goes down, you would have only had Ardarius Washington, who didn't really have that. He also has been injury prone. And then an undrafted guy this year and a 7th-round pick this year. It could have worked. It could have worked. But now you have insurance if Marcus Williams goes down. And that, to me, is the most important part here because injuries happen in football. Injuries happen all over the place. And if we go based off of this trend, and look, maybe Williams stays healthy for all 17 games, and I would absolutely love that. There's nothing more I want than Marcus Williams to stay healthy, this entire team to stay healthy. But in the NFL, teams are moving, not only the Ravens, but just teams in general, are moving to 3 safety looks, multiple defensive back packages. And the biggest thing for me here, and we'll talk about this a little more in the second part of the show, is the reason I wanted a third safety on this team of it is so that they could use Kyle Hamilton properly on this defense. This move allows the Ravens to free up Kyle Hamilton as a chess piece, move him around the defense. That's what having Geno Stone did last season, especially when Marcus was in the lineup. Not that you couldn't have done it without Eddie Jackson. You would have been able to, but it would have been a lot harder. I'll go back to the example I used a lot as we were talking about safety this year. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they had Minkah Fitzpatrick playing a role where his role is similar to Kyle Hamilton's. They're obviously not the exact same player, and Hamilton is better. But the exact thing that Pittsburgh had to deal with last year is that I was worried that Baltimore would have to deal with this year, which is they didn't have a lot of safety depth. Guys were getting injured. Guys were going down. And essentially it pigeonholed Minkah Fitzpatrick into playing just a singular role on that defense. It limited his ability. It limited what he could do on the field. And that hurt Pittsburgh immensely last season. Now Pittsburgh went out there and they signed a bunch of guys, right? They have Deshaun Elliott now, and they have DeMonte KZ, and they have these other safeties so that now Minkah Fitzpatrick can be that roamer. Kyle Hamilton now, we know he is the most effective when he can be a roamer. He can play up at the line. He can play dime in the box. You can use him as a split guy too. This, to me, is a low-risk move for Eddie Jackson. He's going to be able to hopefully stay on the field for you. If there is an injury, he can fill in for Marcus Williams. I mean, you got to weigh both sides here. The Ravens, if they would have signed Jamal Adams, who obviously went to Tennessee, he would have been the Kyle Hamilton insurance. Eddie Jackson is the Marcus Williams insurance. But to me, it was more important to get the Marcus Williams insurance while also assuring that you had just somebody there who had been around the league, who had seen things. And Eddie Jackson has been a leader on that Bears defense for many, many seasons now. So he's a player that I think will fit in that third safety role. And he's a guy, he's not a small guy either. I mean, he's not like this 6'4" safety, but he's 6 foot, weighs around 200, 205 pounds. So he's someone that can impose his will. But again, you're using him more in a coverage role. At this point in his career, the tackling is a bit of an issue. But it's not like, look, it's like I said with Nate Wiggins, right? Eddie Jackson is competitive with it. Sometimes Marcus Williams would take plays off and wouldn't get in there and would kind of make business decisions. Eddie Jackson is not that type of guy. It's like Nate Wiggins, the competitive spirit there. While he might not be as good of a tackler anymore, he brings that element to you, and that to me is important because the Ravens like guys who are competitive, who go out there and leave it all on the field. Eddie Jackson has a lot of passion for the game, and to me, this is what they needed. This is almost, it feels like maybe you could argue a pass rusher, right? You could argue maybe they could go out there, get another vet pass rusher. But at this point, I think the defense is largely complete. I think this team, honestly, if this was the only move Baltimore made, it wouldn't shock me whatsoever. I still think they're leading very hard into their youth. But two, I feel like, the defensive line room, there's, you're set there. Again, you could maybe argue an edge guy, inside linebacker, you're set there. Cornerback, you're set there. Now safety, you're set there. I don't think they make another defensive addition unless it's maybe a pass rusher. Now, in terms of the offense, could they add a Michael Thomas? Sure. Do I expect it? No. I think they're really leaning into Bateman, and I think that's it. Maybe another offensive lineman, but to me, this feels like that final piece. Feels like the final move. Maybe there'll be a couple more here and there, and we'll talk about those. But to me, Eddie Jackson is it's a home run move. You're not signing him to a massive 4-year deal. It's all this guaranteed money. It's a 1-year deal that has come out by multiple sources. I think Schefter, Jess Rebeck end up reporting that as well. So to me, this is exactly what the Ravens need. This is what the doctor ordered, if we're being honest. This is exactly what the doctor ordered. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll continue to talk about what Jackson brings to the table here for the Ravens. We'll talk about a look at Baltimore's updated secondary, the depth both at safety and at cornerback. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot to get to here on this live Purple Friday reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience formula for winning championships is also what keeps ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has it covered. With over 120 million parts, your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the pricing you the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Those items only exclusions by eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. And the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's finding jobs, networking, connecting with people. LinkedIn is a great place to be. Plus, LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Push your job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to push your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are back, our second segment, Locked On Ravens, live on this Friday. Kevin Ostreicher here with you. First live in a couple months here. It's exciting. Again, we're going to get back into the live game here. We go live after every single Ravens game, live after every single piece of Ravens big news as well. So if you want a place for your post-game instant reaction live streams, subscribe here on Locked On Ravens. Tune in, and again, in audio form, they'll be available after the fact as well. Plus, I love interacting with the community. We have Nick saying, nice pickup for the Ravens. And obviously, I forgot. I can now pull these comments up. I forgot. So I'm going to start to pull the comments up as well. Joe saying, get me Zach. For those who don't know, I work over at the Ryan Ripken Show. And we have Kevin and Zach Reacts, where we also react live to stuff. And we signed a safety. I'm so happy for this. I'm so happy that we signed a safety here. Anthony saying, I think this was smart. Right player, right price. Simmons might have been too expensive. That's a good point from Anthony here. Just about, the Simmons price tag was one that maybe, I don't want to say scared teams off, right? But for the Ravens, they had about $6-ish million in cap space. That's tight. Now, for a lot of things that the Ravens do over the course of, training camp and getting people ready and what's their roster going to look like, they like to have some wiggle room money-wise, whether it's for midseason trades, maybe surprise cuts that we don't really know that are going to, because we could be sitting here in, a couple weeks, couple months, and a guy gets cut really early at the beginning of the season. We don't know it. Or a guy is a salary cap casualty, and we didn't expect that guy to be a salary cap casualty. And the Ravens like to pounce on those opportunities. They like to have wiggle room. But with Justin Simmons, yeah, it's going to be interesting because I'm just not Simmons is a better player than Eddie Jackson, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat that and say, Eddie Jackson is so much better. No, Justin Simmons is a better player, but I think Eddie Jackson for the price, which is a lot less. We don't have the actual specifics. At least I'm trying to peruse. I don't think we've seen anything here. But again, when you look at what the Ravens have and what they have to work with, Eddie Jackson makes more sense from a money perspective because you can't sign everybody. You can't keep everybody. There are going to be times where Just have to figure things out. And to me, Jackson fills in a role nicely. So I think even though, yes, Simmons is a better player, I'm completely content and completely fine here with Eddie Jackson. Yeah, Mars saying I agree. We didn't need to drop big money on Simmons. Tanya saying that's Roquan's friend. They should be a force together. Absolutely. Again, those guys go back to Chicago. You have him and Marlon, Eddie Jackson and Marlon Humphrey, who played together at Alabama. So at the end of the day, this is great. I see Rick. What's up, Rick? Calling from Chicago. So I think we've got another Bears fan in here, which is great. So appreciate you for tuning in, Rick. And then Cam saying we had no money for Simmons. I agree with this. Look, Simmons would have been awesome, but you also have to think about role here too, right? With Justin Simmons, he is still a starting level player in this league. He is still a player that will go wherever he goes, right? Wherever he signs. And he will be able to get starter money. I think that's one part of this. Starter money is going to be a big factor for Simmons. Eddie Jackson, this is more of a backup role, so you're not going to pay a backup starter money, even though Simmons is a starter. But the role for him, it just wasn't very clear with the Ravens. I had talked about it on shows throughout the last couple of weeks where it's like it'd be awesome, but realistically, is Simmons going to want to come to Baltimore where he's going to be essentially playing behind Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton? I don't necessarily think so. So, Simmons to me wasn't realistic. Eddie Jackson was. I see Bay. What's up, Bay? Yeah, excitement all around here for Ravens fans. Now, Jackson is a guy that, to me, you rely on in the single high. You rely on to be a coverage, roamer. He can do a lot of different things. And I expect the Ravens, because this is the other thing with the way this Ravens defense is constructed. They lost Patrick Queen. We know he went to Pittsburgh. We know, all the villain talk and Baltimore food takes and whatever, which is still crazy, by the way. The Baltimore food stuff I still can't get over. I'm just like, all right, fine. You enjoy Pittsburgh. That's great. But you bring Baltimore into it? Like, why would you do that? But anyway, Patrick Queen's in Pittsburgh. What they are not married to anymore is playing two inside linebackers on the field at the same time. Obviously, Patrick Queen and Roquan, they played so well off of each other. You don't want to take either of them off the field, especially Roquan. Now, Trenton Simpson can get to that level, right? Trenton Simpson is the guy who's going to come in, take on Patrick Queen's role, but it might take some time. Who knows? Maybe it takes a little time. Maybe it takes a lot of time. But what the Ravens can do now, because the way of two inside linebackers all the time is kind of a dying breed in today's NFL, where you see a lot of dime backers with safety looks in there. You see multiple defensive back packages, and one of those players takes the place of another inside linebacker. So to me, what I think might happen here is, whether it's early on in the season or if Simpson doesn't live up to his billing, which I expect him to, but let's just say he doesn't, the Ravens can use those three safety looks, and you can put all these guys around and move all these guys around. But again, the big thing here is freeing up Kyle Hamilton, like we talked about in the first part of the show, but it just gives them more options. And again, depending on how you feel about Ardarius Washington or not, I still expect him to play some level of a role this year, but I don't think it's necessarily as clear-cut as it was anymore, because that was the guy who they were going to essentially have to have as the third safety. And now they bring in a vet to be able to be just a stabilizing force for depth. And Charles saying they got the guy they needed, someone to fill in. And that's exactly right. Where ideally for Eddie Jackson, he does not have to start a single game this year. Ideally, he does not have to play a boatload of snaps this season. Because why? Because that means Kyle Hamilton stays healthy for the whole year. And that means Marcus Williams stays healthy for the whole year. Hopefully Ardarius does too. But Kyle and Marcus, those are the two you hope stay healthy for the entire season, because those are your starters. Now, if Williams goes down, easy plug and play. You just have the Geno Stone thing. And why was Baltimore's defense so effective last season, right? Because Geno Stone was able to come in once Marcus went down, fill in for him pretty seamlessly, and there wasn't a huge drop-off compared to Marcus and Geno. It was very level compared to those two. And then when Marcus came back, they were able to use Geno in a bunch of different roles, and Marcus wasn't completely healthy. We all know with the pec, couldn't really, the arm thing was a little tough. But still, Geno came in and filled a role for them. So not every move has to be a flashy move. Not every move has to be a starter-level move. Not every player has to have all strengths and no weaknesses. In fact, no player has all strengths and no weaknesses. But for Eddie Jackson, when you talk about the type of safety Baltimore needed, it was, again, do you prioritize the dime backer guy, the in-the-box physical player send to the line? Do you prioritize that as your depth? Or do you prioritize the single high player, coverage guy? You can put him on an island. You can roam around. Do you prioritize that? And that's what Baltimore prioritized. That, to me, was the correct decision. So I'm over the move with this. George saying, solid Ravens move. I do. This does scream Ravens, doesn't it? The Ravens are never a team that goes out there on the first day of free agency and spends $120 million. Now, we saw it a couple years ago on the second day, back in 2022, when they signed Marcus Williams and Morgan Moses, and they were going to sign Zadarius Smith, although we all know what happened with that. But they spent a lot of money. That was not Ravens-like. What George is saying here, the Ravens move is they wait it out, they figure out the market. Because maybe, what happened with Eddie Jackson was maybe he was asking here for maybe a multi-year contract in the early parts of free agency, maybe more money per year, more total money, more guarantees, whatever it may be. And then the safety market just didn't develop, right? I mean, let's go back. Geno Stone signed for, what was that deal? 2 years, $14 million, 2 years, 16, 17. I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it might've been 13 and a half, if I'm not mistaken here, but that was a lot less. I think people were projecting Geno Stone out to have like 3 year, 36 mil, like 12 per year, 11 per year. The safety market never developed. And it's right now, for the amount of safeties out there, the market is oversaturated for players. Because it's, okay, Justin Simmons still has to get signed. Quandre Diggs. Marcus May already signed. It's Justin Simmons, Quandre Diggs, Eddie Jackson, and Micah Hyde, and all these guys. That's an oversaturated market for players. And so if one player is asking for a bunch of money and just saying, okay, well, this is my asking price, a team might just say, okay, we like you, but there's another guy who's asking for less. And it's, again, like it's pitting guys against each other. So maybe Jackson was asking for more early in free agency, and this is kind of, they were waiting it out. They understood the safety market. There would be a guy available for them, whether Simmons, Jackson, Hyde, Diggs, whoever, and they got their guy probably for less money than he was asking for at the beginning of the offseason. So I think it is a solid Ravens move. To George, Cam saying I like Ardarius. Me too. If you've been with me for a while here, if you're an everyday, you've been with me for a really long time here. He was one of my guys in that 2021 draft. I think 2021, maybe 2022. I can't remember when he he went undrafted. But Ardarius Washington was supposed to be a third, fourth round pick, went undrafted because of his size, and wasn't really favored by Don Martindale. I think the size, he was concerned about that. Now, other people, I think, overruled him on that decision to have him make the roster. But to me, Washington is a really good player, and I don't like to put all this stock into, just only look at the size, Washington is a heck of a player, but to me, I think that you feel a lot better with him as your fourth safety, right? I think Washington as your fourth safety is awesome. I love that personally. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about an updated look at Baltimore's secondary. Again, the safety depth, but also look at the cornerback room and the secondary as a whole, and even maybe take that and make it a fuller size picture and look at the whole defense as well. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot to get to here on this live edition of Locked On Ravens here on Friday. First, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And for me, there are a lot of different times where sometimes people can get maybe caught up in the life of others, but social media can definitely play a part in that. And when I get caught up with all that, I just look at what I do have as opposed to what someone else has. And comparison is a thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on their Instagram, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. And therapy has so many benefits, whether it's learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. It can empower you to become the best version of yourself. And just for those who've experienced major trauma, it's for everyone. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a free questionnaire to get a master licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. We return Locked On Ravens live edition on Friday. Really appreciate everybody for being here. Again, these lives are exciting. You know what? This means we are closer to football season. Training camp starts up tomorrow. By the way, we will be having 2 bonus episodes this weekend. We'll be diving a bit more into the Eddie Jackson signing tomorrow and what he brings to the table, kind of continuing that conversation, and also getting into some training camp preview. And then on Sunday, we'll be going more so full training camp preview with the guys being there and that really being the, they'll be there on Saturday. We'll talk about that on Sunday. So 2 bonus episodes coming your way. Again, we go 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, daily Ravens coverage. So Monday through Friday is our regular show, but we do bonus episodes as well. So let's talk about the Ravens secondary overall as a whole. I put this out as a tweet, and I will read it out here once I find it quickly. I've tried to get out a lot of tweets over the course of the last hour or so. But all right, the Ravens updated secondary: Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, Nate Wiggins, TJ Tampa, Arthur Millette, Ardarius Washington, Pepe Williams, Jalen Armour-Davis, Sanusi Kane, Bo Braid, and then we have, I Didn't include some of the other undrafted guys because I was trying to go fast. But Baltimore has a lot of just incredible players, really good players. And I think with Baltimore's secondary, they value physicality. Marlon Humphrey's a super physical corner. Brandon Stevens is a very physical corner as well. We know that Kyle Hamilton and his physicality, you can play him in the run game really well, and he does that job up at the line. We know he sheds blocks effectively. Marcus Williams has that element to him. Eddie Jackson has that element to him. But to me, this secondary, the depth is so good this year. Now, I would hate to see this ruined by injuries. And some years it is. The saying that everybody uses, and I use it too, is, you know what? There are 50 healthy corners to start the season, and by the end of the season, there are 2. All this secondary depth, everybody's talking about how good the secondary depth is, and then injury after injury after injury. I would love a year where that doesn't happen for Baltimore, and that includes, because again, there is a common misconception that Baltimore was healthy last season because they didn't lose a bunch of guys to injury for the season. Well, guess what? They were very banged up. They lost a bunch of guys for 2 weeks, a bunch of guys for a month, a bunch of guys for a month and a half. Other guys came back after 2 months. This Ravens secondary, I mean, you look at the top 3 safety-wise, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson. You want to throw out Darius Washington in his 4. All right, let's do that. We'll throw him in too. That's a really, really, really good group. It's probably one of the best. I think that's probably the best safety trio in the league, in my opinion. I think it is. It is the best safety trio in the league. Then you look at the corners, Humphrey, Stevens, Wiggins. That's an upgrade over Humphrey, Stevens, Darby, by the way. Then you have TJ Tampa as your 4th guy, Arthur Millette playing in the slot. And we know that Baltimore loves their 3-corner rotations, as I've said over and over and over on this show, being able to rotate in guys and making sure that they are able to stay fresh for games, for seasons. And that, to me, is really important. So Tyler's saying we have to have at least the top 3 secondary. I think Baltimore's up there for sure. If not the best, they are at least a top 3 secondary. Because, again, that top 5 is unreal. Top 6 even is unreal. Humphrey, Stevens, Hamilton, Williams, Jackson, Wiggins. That top 6 is unbelievable. Plus, you have the depth. Marlette, Tampa, Washington, Pepe Williams. I mean, these guys, even if you want to go 8 deep, that to me is fine. 9 deep, that to me is great. And again, how many guys are going to make this roster? I do think this maybe puts a stretch. I would only anticipate Baltimore keeping 5 safeties. At this point, it's going to be Hamilton, Williams, Jackson, and Washington. That to me, I think is clear. But I think for the 5th safety spot, it's going to be Sanusi Kane and Bo Braid, and the other they're going to try to sneak onto the practice squad with the potential that if both of them have good preseasons, you might end up losing one, and that just is what it is. So it puts a squeeze on your depth in terms of your late round picks, the undrafted picks, which is fine. I think that is far worth it to me. Eddie Jackson is far worth having to have that good problem, which is choosing between what hopefully will be 2 good young guys and maybe sneaking the other guy on the practice squad. And Tiny's saying we have impact players on deals. We just have to have good players to fill voids like we did last season. And that's exactly right. This is a great point because remember, going into training camp or going into the latter parts of the offseason last year, we were talking about, okay, well, they need some pass rushers and they maybe need a corner or 2 here. And, maybe they'll sign another guy here. And they got Clowney and Van Noy and Millette and all these other guys that filled voids. Darby, they filled voids. And this time last year, we were talking about when Clowney signed and when Van Noy and all these guys, we were talking about, well, how much do these guys really have left in the tank, right? What are they really going to bring? And I think Eddie Jackson, we understand he's a good player. It's just a matter of, even though he's not, 2018 Eddie Jackson anymore, can he be a viable 3rd guy? And that's the thing. I talked about it very early on. You're not relying on him to be a starter. You're not relying on him to go out there and just eat snap after snap after snap. Now, if it comes to that with injuries, okay. But you would rather have Eddie Jackson be your injury depth and your replacement as opposed to maybe your starter here in this secondary. And that, to me, is a great thing. And this is exactly what I was talking about. Great point here, Charles. If Kyle and Marcus stay healthy, you won't see much of Jackson. That's exactly what we want. That's exactly what we want. If Kyle Hamilton stays healthy, if Marcus Williams stay healthy, you don't want to see Eddie Jackson. And how do you not see Eddie Jackson if those 2 guys stay on the field? Now, obviously, they'll use 3 safety looks. He'll be in for certain packages, and that's great. But if he's in a starter role, that is not what you want to see him as, right? Because that means one of their guys went down. So I see Joe saying he did go to Bama. Not everyone can be perfect. Joe's a big Arkansas guy for those who don't know. So Alabama and Arkansas don't get along too well. But hey, you know what? Another Bama guy for the Ravens. That to me does not shock me at all. Tanya saying Ardarius' size has made him unavailable at the beginning of every season, even though I like his game. Yeah, I mean, the size probably plays some level of a factor, but I'm not going to say it plays the whole thing. I just think some guys are, just get unlucky injury-wise, and there are metrics, and I'm curious, actually. Maybe I'll talk with Kadri Ismail, who we had on today, about this next week, about size and how that can impact injuries, especially in football. And Q and I, by the way, had a great conversation about Derrick Henry. There were some details that came out about the failed trade between the Ravens and the Titans last year, plus what he does to maintain his body. So if you haven't checked that episode out, be sure to check that out after this one. Ravens by a million. I hear you, Joe. We got King Blaze in here with the purple devil emojis. It's going to be hopefully scary season for the Ravens this year. And Ravens 76B more saying with the signing, Kyle Hamilton is going to eat and win Defensive Player of the Year. I look, if you're over on FanDuel and you're looking at Defensive Player of the Year odds, I think Kyle Hamilton is a very good bet to do that, because again, this frees him up. This is the final thing for him. This is what he needed. It's not only about safety depth with Marcus Williams and that potential injury risk. It's about freeing Hamilton up. I've been saying it the whole entire show. So to me, that's another super huge important part of this thing. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else here. I think for the most part, that's all the news. I mean, we're going to see the Ravens again. Their vets report to training camp tomorrow. Obviously, we've already had quarterbacks, rookies, injured guys. They're all there already. So we got some injury news over the course of the past week with Keaton Mitchell, Adisa Isaac, and TJ Tampa. But the Ravens, I think, make a very solid move here, bringing in Eddie Jackson. If I had to grade this move, I give it an A. I do. I know a lot of people kind of hopped off the safety depth train. I stayed on it, and I think maybe people pivoted to offensive line or edge rusher. And look, if you did, that's completely okay. That's completely okay. But to me, I do think this was a need for them. I'm very glad they addressed it. And at the end of the day, a trio of Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, and Eddie Jackson, that is one. And I see Yolanda checking in, saying, I was hoping for Justin Simmons. Well, let's roll with Eddie Jackson. Look, Yolanda, I'm with you. I think that Eddie Jackson, to me, was the more realistic option. Justin Simmons is the better player, and I would have loved him in Baltimore. But, yeah, I think just money-wise and role-wise, it just didn't make a lot of sense, because he's still a starter, and he'd be a backup in this defense. So I think Jackson, too, you get him for less money. He fills a void for you either way. So Simmons, I think, would have been great. But you're right. Let's roll. Let's go. Let's go with Eddie Jackson. Jay Reiser, 15. Ravens bring the best out of vet defensive players. If he gets back to 2018 levels of play, it's a no-fly zone. And this is the great part, too, because this is a good point, but I don't even think he has to get back to 2018. If he can even get back to like 3/4 of that, right? If he can get back to 3/4 of that and still provide just some depth there, some depth that can come in, maybe a spot starter, too, if a guy has to go down or miss some time. He can play in a role as a backup type player. That's all they need from him. So he doesn't have to be 2018 Eddie Jackson. I don't expect them to ask that of him either. But if he can get back to some level of that, that is a huge, huge thing for this team. Chris saying we got the best DB. I think they got the best DBs in the league, at least one of the best DBs. And Yolanda, I'm glad you agree with me on that. Again, Simmons would have been awesome, but Jackson, I'm completely okay with it. And Jared saying replacing Stone with Jackson is a deal. I'm with it. I'm with it. I think that for me, that's a good one-for-one replacement, right? You needed somebody to fill in with that role, third safety. And at the end of the day, that to me is a really important thing, that now you feel comfortable with the veteran depth behind your other star players. And I think that's all people are asking for in the first place. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning in. I see Antonio saying, sure, we'll have 6 DBs on the field this year for sure. And Tanya, I completely agree with this one too. Simmons wants to be a starter. We have Hamilton, and he wants a bag, not for a third safety. Good points on that one as well. But appreciate everybody for tuning in on this Friday bonus episode. Again, be sure to check out our episode we put out today with Kadri Ismail about Derrick Henry and that failed trade between the Ravens and the Titans, as well as what he puts into his body. And then be sure to like and subscribe over here on YouTube. Again, turn notifications on for whenever we do go live. Again, we'll be going live after every single game this season, including preseason. And then we'll be talking about as well lives for every single piece of Ravens big news. So this obviously falls under that umbrella. And in audio form, these will be out after the fact. So if you maybe miss a live show, you want to listen to it instead of watch, if that's your preference, we have them in audio form as well. But that's all I have for you. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend, but I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked on Ravens. Anyway, we'll talk about a bonus episode, talk about Eddie Jackson a little bit more. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked on Ravens.